The drive up to High Lark Lodge took 3 hours longer than it should have. I'd punched the address into my phone that morning in Denver, watching my credit card decline for the 4th time at a gas station, and told myself this was temporary. A reset, 6 months in the mountains, free housing, decent tips, and enough distance from my collapsed life to figure out what came next. Elena Park, 26 years old, bachelor's in hospitality management, currently living out of a duffel bag in her ex-roommate's garage. That was me. High Lark was supposed to be a clean slate. The lodge appeared at the end of a serpentine access road, rising out of the tree line like something carved rather than built. Timber beams thick as telephone poles, river stone chimneys, and a roof pitch steep enough to shed avalanches. The kind of place that looked warm in brochures and cold in person. Behind it, the ridgeline stood bare and sharp, wind carving snow into long horizontal scars across the rock face. It was early November. The resort wouldn't open for another 2 weeks, but the mountain didn't seem to care about schedules. Marta Chenoweth, the general manager, met me in the staff parking lot. She was somewhere north of 50, with silver hair pulled tight and a parka that looked military-grade. She shook my hand without smiling. "You're the new night audit," she said. "Not a question." "Yes, ma'am." "Good, we need steady." "Last 2 didn't finish the season." She didn't elaborate. Instead, she handed me a key ring heavy enough to be a weapon, a 2-way radio clipped to a belt holster, and a laminated orientation packet that smelled faintly of bleach. "You'll shadow tonight, then solo tomorrow. Front desk, night audit, incident log. Standard stuff. Any questions, radio security or me? Don't wander off property after dark." "Understood." She turned to leave, then paused and pulled something from her jacket, a folded square of cardstock, cream-colored, edges softened by handling. She tucked it inside the maintenance log on top of my packet. "Read this in your room," she said quietly. "Keep it to yourself. Trust me." Her tone made my skin prickle, but I nodded. She walked away without another word, boots crunching through the lot's thin snow. Inside, the lodge was exactly what I'd expected. Antler chandeliers, leather furniture worn smooth, a 2-story hearth with a fire already crackling. The air smelled of cedar smoke and something sharper, pine sap maybe, or the ghost of 100 ski waxes. It should have felt cozy. Instead, it felt like standing inside a ribcage. I checked in at the front desk, a long counter of lacquered pine under soft yellow lamps. The day shift clerk, a college kid named Travis, gave me a rushed tour. POS system, key programmer, safe drop, incident binder, radio codes. He kept glancing at the windows. By 8:30 he was gone. I was alone. The wind picked up around 9, rattling the eaves. I could hear it moving through the lodge's skeleton, a low wooden groan that sounded almost vocal. I busied myself with the audit checklist, counted the drawer, logged no-shows, prepped folios for checkout. Somewhere around 9:40, I remembered the card Marta had given me. I pulled it from the maintenance log and unfolded it under the desk lamp. Lodge Night Rules. The title was printed in an old typewriter font, slightly uneven. Beneath it 9 entries, written in different hands, some in ballpoint, some in pencil, a few bled by water or salt. The ink colors didn't match. The paper had been folded and unfolded so many times, the creases had started to tear. I read it once, then again, slower. After 10:30 p.m., do not open exterior doors for anyone. If a guest is locked out, speak through glass and call security to fetch them. If you hear your name in the snow, you'll know what it means. Do not answer. Do not look toward the voice. Never follow footprints that go uphill against fresh wind. They are not yours to follow. Chair 7 runs last at 4:44 p.m. If you see it moving after dark, don't watch the riders. Close the blinds. If the ridge beacon pulses red 3 times, turn off the lobby chandeliers and ring the brass desk bell once. Wait. Turn lights back on in 2 minutes. Any guest keycard that demagnetizes 3 times in one night goes in the fireplace ash. No reissue, no mirrors uncovered in a whiteout. Sheet them. When the boiler knocks in sets of 4, answer the phone on the first ring. Say nothing. Hang up when you hear the breath. Do not be inside the lodge when the first blue of dawn touches the east windows. Leave and re-enter through the north service door. I stared at it for a long moment, then laughed, short, nervous, alone. It read like a creepypasta, the kind of thing bored lift operators passed around to scare seasonals. I snapped a photo with my phone. planning to text it to my brother with some joke about mountain folklore, then tucked the card back into the log. The wind howled louder. Somewhere above me, the building flexed. I told myself it was just wood settling. Just wind, just a job. I couldn't stop thinking about the card. It sat in the maintenance log like a burr, and every time I passed the desk I felt its presence. By 10 o'clock, the lobby had emptied. The last guest, a middle-aged man in a Patagonia vest, wished me good night and disappeared up the stairs. The fire hissed and popped. The chandeliers swayed slightly in some draught I couldn't identify. I pulled the card out again. This time I studied it. Not the rules themselves, but the annotations. Someone had written in tight, spidery script along the margins, tested 3-1289's mirror rule works. Don't skip. Beneath Rule 5, in faded pencil, red means it's looking. Bell tells it you see it back. Next to Rule 9 in blue ink, underlined twice, dawn is not safe. At the bottom of the card, a list of initials and years, and TV 1977, MK 1984, JL 1991, stayed. PH 1998, DR 2003, AS 2011, CF 2019, stayed. The word stayed had been crossed out both times and rewritten. The ink looked angry. I turned the card over. On the back, in handwriting so old it had browned, "The mountain does not sleep. It watches with more than snow." My throat went dry. I told myself this was hazing, an elaborate prank played on every new hire, probably maintained by staff for decades. I could already picture Travis and Marta laughing about it over coffee. Maybe there was a hidden camera somewhere. Maybe the wind stopped. Not faded, stopped. The kind of silence that makes you realize how loud the world was a moment before. The fire kept burning, but I couldn't hear it anymore. The building didn't creak. The chandeliers hung perfectly still, and then, from somewhere far off, maybe the ridge, maybe closer, I heard it, a voice faint, muffled by distance or snow, calling a name I couldn't quite make out. It wasn't words exactly. It was the shape of a name, the melody of it, rising and falling like a question. I stood very still behind the desk, hands flat on the counter. The voice came again, clearer this time, and my stomach dropped, because I knew what it meant, not the words. Not yet. But the feeling, the way it curled into my ear like cold water, the way it made my spine straighten, and my head turn toward the windows without permission, I forced myself to look down at the card. Rule 2. If you hear your name in the snow, you'll know what it means. Do not answer. Do not look toward the voice. The voice didn't come a third time. The wind resumed, sudden and violent, and the building groaned like a waking animal. I shoved the card back into the log, heart hammering, and returned to the audit. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was the altitude, thin air, fatigue, but I didn't look at the windows for the rest of the hour. At 11, I radioed security for a welfare check, just to hear another human voice. A woman responded, calm, clipped, professional. "Front desk, this is Gomez, all clear." "All clear," I said too quickly. "Just checking in. Copy, quiet night so far. Stay warm." The line clicked off. I wasn't warm. I pulled my jacket tighter and glanced at the card one more time, committing the rules to memory. They were absurd. They had to be. But somewhere beneath my rational mind, a smaller, older part of me was already listening, already preparing to obey. The windstorm hit at 9:50, exactly as I was balancing the day's credit card batch. It came from nowhere. One moment the night was still, the next the lodge was shuddering under a freight train roar. Snow blasted against the windows in horizontal sheets, erasing the parking lot, the tree line, everything. The glass fogged and rattled in its frames. I could feel the cold pressing through the panes like something alive. I finished the batch, printed the Zed report, and crossed the lobby to drop the deposit bag in the back office safe. My footsteps echoed too loud. The fire had burned low, and the chandeliers above me swayed in a rhythm that didn't quite match the wind outside. That's when I saw it. Movement in the far window, past the reflection of the lobby. At first I thought it was a tree branch, or maybe the edge of a tarp snapping loose. But it was too rhythmic, too smooth. Chair 7. The lift ran from mid-mountain to the ridgeline, a fixed-grip double with faded red seats. During the day it was visible from the lodge's west-facing windows, a line of tiny seats crawling up the slope. At night it was supposed to be dead, powered down, locked. Motionless, but it was moving. I stopped mid-step, deposit bag forgotten in my hand, and stared. The chairs drifted along the cable, one after another, swaying slightly in the wind. Slow, steady, impossible. Rule 4. Chair 7 runs last at 4:44 p.m. If you see it moving after dark, don't watch the riders. Close the blinds. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I told myself it was a reflection, a trick of the light. The chandeliers swaying, the firelight bending through fogged glass. I told myself lift-ups would never leave a line running overnight. It was dangerous. It was one of the chairs passed beneath the mid-tower floodlight. There were 2 people in it. I could see their shapes clearly. 2 figures sitting upright, shoulders parallel, facing downhill toward the lodge. They weren't moving. No shifting weight, no adjusting grip on the safety bar. Just sitting perfectly still as the chair carried them up into the dark. Where their faces should have been, there was only snow glare, blank, white, featureless, and then I saw the third shape. It wasn't sitting. It was hanging. Legs dangling straight down from the safety bar, arms limp, head tilted at an angle that made my stomach lurch. It swayed slightly as the chair climbed, a pendulum keeping time. I couldn't breathe. My hand moved to the window blind cord before I knew what I was doing. I yanked it hard, and the heavy fabric dropped, cutting off the view. The moment the blind sealed, the chandeliers above me hummed, loud, electric, a spike of current that made the bulbs flare white. Then they dimmed, not flickered. Dimmed, as though something had drawn power from them all at once. I turned, pulse hammering in my throat, and looked at the ridge beacon, a red aircraft warning light mounted on the summit tower, visible from the lodge even in bad weather. It pulsed, red, 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 3 times, slow and deliberate like a heartbeat. Rule 5. If the ridge beacon pulses red 3 times, turn off the lobby chandeliers and ring the brass desk bell once. Wait, turn lights back on in 2 minutes. I didn't think. My body moved on instinct, some part of me already convinced that hesitation was worse than compliance. I crossed to the light panel behind the desk and killed the chandeliers. The lobby plunged into half dark, lit only by the fire and the faint glow of the exit signs. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick and watchful. I could hear my own breathing, too fast, too shallow. The brass bell sat on the counter, a old-fashioned service bell, tarnished and heavy. I raised my hand and brought it down once. The chime rang clear and bright, cutting through the silence like a blade, and then the radio on my hip hissed, not static, not a voice. A long, steady inhale, as if something on the other end of the frequency had pressed its mouth to the microphone and breathed in. Slow and deep, I froze, staring at the radio. The inhale held, held. I checked my watch. 2 minutes. I had to wait 2 minutes. The seconds stretched. The fire popped. The wind screamed outside. The radio kept hissing that terrible, unbroken breath. At 1 minute 58, I reached for the light panel. At 2 minutes exactly, I flipped the chandeliers back on. The radio went silent. The lobby snapped back into warm yellow light, the fire crackling cheerfully, the shadows retreating to their proper places. Everything looked normal, safe. I turned to the window, heart still racing, and peeked through a gap in the blinds. Chair 7 was motionless. The cable hung slack in the wind. The seats swayed slightly, empty, spaced evenly along the line. The floodlight at mid-tower illuminated nothing but falling snow. I let the blind drop and stood there, shaking, deposit bag still clutched in my white-knuckled hand. Somewhere in the back of my mind, the rational part, the part that had laughed at the rules, that had called them folklore, took a single, stumbling step backward and left me alone with the truth. I met Josh Moreno 2 days later, and I knew immediately he was going to be a problem. He worked in the rental shop, tuning boards and skis, and he had the kind of energy that filled a room. Loud laugh, easy grin, always moving. 22, maybe 23, with sun-bleached hair and a faint goggle tan already etched into his face despite the resort not even being open yet. He went by Jax online, where he ran a YouTube channel called Shredge, dedicated to snowboarding, gear reviews, and, recently, haunted mountain content. I found this out because he cornered me in the staff cafeteria during my break. Phone already out, filming. "Yo, you're Elena, right? Night audit." He didn't wait for an answer. Dude, have you seen the rules? He said the last word in a mock spooky voice, wiggling his fingers. Marta gave me the same card. It's so extra. Like, don't open doors after 10:30. Bro, it's a ski lodge, not a haunted asylum. Maybe just follow them anyway, I said, focusing on my coffee. Follow them? He laughed. Nah, man, this is content. I already got a video queued up. Highlark Haunted, we break the rules. He showed me his phone. The thumbnail was his face in night vision green, eyes wide, a plastic Yeti doll photoshopped behind him. The title, Cursed Sky Lodge Rules Gone Wrong? I felt a spike of irritation. You know those rules aren't a joke, right? Says who, you? He grinned. Come on. It's just mountain law. Resorts do this to keep people from wandering off after they've been drinking. Scare tactics. It's smart, honestly. Then why'd Marta tell you to keep it to yourself? Because it's more fun if it stays creepy. He pocketed his phone. Look, I've worked 3 resorts. Every single one has some version of this. Don't go in the old lift shack, don't ski closed terrain, don't whistle at the summit. It's a vibe. And I'm here for it. I didn't argue. I just finished my coffee and left. But that night, when he showed up at the front desk at 11:40, with his grin and his phone and his absolute certainty that nothing on the mountain could touch him, I felt dread settle into my chest like a stone. The whiteout came in fast. One moment the windows showed the parking lot and the dark shapes of trees. The next, the world was erased. Snow fell in a dense sideways curtain, so thick it looked like static. The glass fogged over. The temperature inside the lobby dropped noticeably despite the fire. I remembered Rule 7, no mirrors uncovered in a whiteout. Sheet them? There was a large mirror on the west wall framed in pine reflecting the lobby back at itself. I grabbed a bedsheet from the housekeeping closet and draped it over the glass, tucking the edges tight. Jax watched from the couch, amused. You're really doing this? Yes, why? Because the card says to. He stood, crossed to the mirror, and yanked the sheet down. Ghost check, he announced to his phone camera, pointing it at his reflection. He leaned in close, grinning. See? Nothing. Just me and my... He stopped. His grin faltered. He tilted his head, staring at the screen. What? I asked. The cameras... He tapped the screen. Latency's weird. Like I move and then the reflection moves. Just a frame behind. He waved his hand. His reflection waved back, but the timing was off, barely but off, like a bad dub. Cover it, I said. It's a dirty lens or something. But his voice had thinned. He wiped the camera with his shirt, tried again. Same delay, same wrongness. He lowered the phone slowly, staring at the mirror now with something closer to unease. I pulled the sheet back over the glass and weighted it down with a chair. Jax didn't argue. At 12:14, the boiler knocked. 4 times. Deep, resonant metal-on-metal clangs that came from somewhere below the lobby, in the guts of the building. Rule 8, when the boiler knocks in sets of 4, answer the phone on the first ring. Say nothing. Hang up when you hear the breath. The desk phone rang once. I picked it up on the first tone and said nothing. Jax, standing by the couch, mouthed, Seriously? I nodded, pressing the receiver to my ear. On the other end, silence. Then faint and close, as if the speaker were leaning into the mouthpiece. Breath, not panting. Not gasping. Just a slow, steady exhale, cold and damp, carrying a sound underneath it like wind through a crack in stone. It went on for 10 seconds, 15. My hand tightened on the phone, the breath stopped. I hung up. Jack stared at me. That's just the HVAC system or something. Old buildings do that. Sure, I said. He looked like he wanted to argue, then didn't. Instead, he shoved his hands in his pockets and headed for the loading dock. I'm gonna smoke. Don't go outside, I said. It's the loading dock. Eleanor, it's got a roof. Rule 1, after 10:30. I know, he said, already pushing through the hallway door. I'll be right back. I watched him go, unease crawling up my spine. 2 minutes later, I heard it. A knock. Soft. Polite. 3 taps on the loading dock door, and then a voice, my voice, calling through the metal. Jax? Jax, it's freezing. Let me in. My blood turned to ice. I ran to the hallway and saw him through the porthole window, standing on the inside of the dock door, hand on the latch. Beyond the glass, the snow swirled thick and white. There was no one outside. No footprints. No shape. But the knocking came again, tap, 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 and the voice repeated pitch perfect, "Jax, come on. Open up." He grinned at me through the window. "Nice try," he mouthed. His hand moved to the latch. I slammed my palm against the panic bar and locked the door from the inside. "Don't," I said. He froze, confused. What, that's not me," I said. "I'm right here." He looked at me, looked at the door. Back at me. The knocking stopped. Jax pulled his hand away from the latch slowly, face pale. "I'm going back to the lobby," he said quietly. "Good idea." He walked past me without another word, hands shaking, and I followed. When I checked the snow outside the dock threshold through a side window, I saw it clearly. No footprints leading away, no footprints at all. Jax didn't come back for 20 minutes. When he finally returned to the front desk, he was pale, eyes red-rimmed, shoulders hunched. He wouldn't look at me. "You okay?" I asked. Got turned around, he said, voice flat. "In the hallway. Kept hearing. I thought you were calling me from the equipment room. But when I opened the door, it was just..." He stopped, swallowed. "Nothing. Just Rax. Jax, I'm good," he said too quickly. He pulled out his phone, stared at the screen, and then opened his video app. I watched him scroll through his drafts, the High Lark haunted videos, the Yeti thumbnails, the mocking captions. He deleted them one by one, without a word. He shoved the phone in his pocket and walked away. I didn't see him for the rest of the shift. The storms came in waves after that. 2 days of wind and snow, a brief clearing, then another whiteout. The resort still hadn't opened, but the skeleton crew stayed busy, clearing walks, testing lifts, running supply inventories. I kept my head down and worked nights, following the rules like a script. I didn't hear my name in the snow again, but I felt watched. It wasn't paranoia. It was attention, patient, constant, the way you feel someone's gaze on the back of your neck. I started keeping the blinds closed unless I needed them open. I sheeted the mirrors preemptively. I checked the ridge beacon every hour, and I started asking questions. The concierge desk sat in a corner of the lobby. A narrow workstation cluttered with resort maps, brochures, and an ancient Rolodex that probably predated email. It was abandoned most nights. On the third evening after the Jax incident, I noticed the bottom drawer was locked. I'm not proud of what I did next. I waited until 2 a.m., when security was running their perimeter check, and picked the lock with a bent paperclip and a bobby pin from my pocket. It took 3 tries, but the mechanism was old and forgiving. The drawer slid open with a squeal. Inside, papers, stacks of them. Incident slips on yellowed resort letterhead organized by year. Polaroids clipped to some of the pages, edges curled. A mimeographed copy of the rules, faded to near illegibility. Dated 1976. Maintenance logs with marginalia in a dozen different hands. I pulled the stack out and spread it on the desk under the lamp. The incident slips were clinical. Detached 11/18/1979, night audit report. T. Vosguest in 212 reported hearing knocking from inside the closet. No source identified. Guest checked out early 3/4/1984. Maintenance log, M. Kushner boiler pressure normal. Knocking persists in 4-count intervals. Phone line to front desk. Shows no external calls but rings 2-3 times per night. Advise new hire to follow protocol. 2/22/1991. Incident slip. J. Landry guest in 407 found unresponsive in chair by east windows at dawn. Coroner ruled natural causes, cardiac event. But witness, housekeeper R. Ruiz, reports guest was staring at something outside and smiling. Window faces ridge. The word smiling was underlined 3 times. I flipped to the Polaroids. One showed the lobby mirror, angled to capture the Christmas tree and the front desk. I counted the reflections, 13 people. I counted the actual people visible in the photo's foreground. 10. Another photo. The ridge beacon at night, pulsing red, illuminating a blank slope. But in the snow near the bottom of the frame, something dark and vertical, too tall to be a person, too still to be a tree. A third photo, dated 1998, showed chair 7 at night. Seats hanging motionless, but in one chair a shape. Blurred, overexposed, but there. My hands were shaking. I found the mimeographed rules from 1976. The list was shorter, only 6 entries, but the language was almost identical. Someone had added notes in pencil, the 7 to 3, tested. Don't follow the prints. They lead to the summit and stop at the edge. 5. Red means it's looking. Bell tells it you see it back. Don't forget the bell. 9. Dawn is not safe. Blue light, not sunrise. At the bottom of the page, a handwritten list, Lodge night staff at departures, T. Voss, 1979, quit no notice. M. Kushner, 1984, completed season. J. Landry, 1991, stayed. P. Hammond, 1998, completed season. D. Ruiz, 2003, quit no notice. A. Singh, 2011, completed season. C. Frost, 2019, stayed. The word stayed was circled in red ink both times it appeared. I stared at it, trying to pass the meaning, and then I heard it. 4 knocks from below, the boiler. I shoved the papers back into the drawer, slammed it shut and crossed to the desk. The phone rang on the first beat. I answered. Silence. Then the breath, slow, cold, impossibly patient. I held the receiver to my ear and waited, every muscle locked, until the breath stopped. I hung up. My heart was a drum in my throat. I looked down at the drawer. At the locked mechanism I'd violated. At the years of names and annotations and warnings left by people who'd worked this desk before me, people who'd stayed. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that I didn't want to find out. I met Harlan Boone in the staff cafeteria on a grey morning between storms. He was sitting alone in the far corner, back to the wall, nursing a thermos of black coffee from a dented steel container stamped with a faded logo. Highlark Lodge, 1984. I'd seen him before, always at a distance, always alone. He worked lift maintenance, the kind of job that kept you outdoors in all weather, and it showed. His face was wind-carved, deep lines around the eyes and mouth, skin the color of old leather. He wore a wool beanie pulled low, fingerless gloves with the knuckles taped, and a Carhartt jacket that looked like it had survived a decade of winters. I didn't approach him. He approached me. "You're the new night audit," he said, without looking up from his coffee. I froze mid-step, tray in hand. "Yeah, how'd you—" "Marta tells me things." He tapped the side of his thermos. "Sit." It wasn't a question. I sat. He studied me for a long moment, eyes pale and unblinking, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded card, cream-colored, worn at the edges. "My card, the rule card. You've been reading this," he said. "How do you know that?" "Because you're still here." He set it on the table between us. "Most people don't make it past the first week. They quit, or they convince themselves it's a prank, or they—" He trailed off, gaze shifting to the windows. "They stay." That word again. Stayed. What does that mean? I asked. "In the old logs, some names are marked stayed." "What happened to them?" Harlan's jaw tightened. "They didn't leave when they should have." "What does that mean?" He took a slow sip of coffee, then set the thermos down with a soft clink. "The rules aren't rules," he said quietly. "They're courtesies. You follow them. You're telling the mountain you see it. You respect it. You're not prey, you're a guest." He leaned forward slightly. "But the mountain doesn't chase. It invites. It waits for you to say yes." "Say yes to what?" "To looking. To listening. To staying just a little too long." His eyes locked on mine. "You say yes with your eyes, Elena. You say yes by watching what you shouldn't, by answering when it calls, by being inside when the blue light comes." A chill crawled down my spine. "The people who stayed," I said. "They said yes. They thought they were safe." His voice was flat, but something moved behind it, old grief maybe, or exhaustion. "They thought dawn was dawn. They thought the light in the windows was sunrise." He shook his head slowly. "It's not. I thought of Rule 9. Do not be inside the lodge when the first blue of dawn touches the east windows. Leave and re-enter through the north service door. What is it?" I whispered. Harlan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled a folded napkin from his pocket and wrote on it with a, "If a guest comes down from closed terrain without snow on them, that's not a guest. Send them to security. Lights bright, radio on. Do not meet their eyes in the glass. Never name the ridgeline aloud after midnight." "It isn't a landmark, then." "It's a mouth." I stared at the words, pulse thudding in my ears. "Why aren't these on the card?" I asked. "Because some rules can't be written down until they're tested," he said. "And because the mountain listens." He stood, thermos in hand, and paused. "You're doing good, Elena. Better than most. But the season's just started." He nodded toward the windows. where the ridgeline was barely visible through the fog. Don't get confident. Confidence is a window. A window to what? To saying yes. He walked away, boots heavy on the tile, and left me sitting alone with his 2 new rules and the cold knowledge that I was only beginning to understand what I was up against. That night, I taped Harlan's napkin to the inside of my jacket pocket, next to the rule card. I didn't name the ridgeline, I didn't watch the windows longer than I had to, and when a guest knocked on the front desk at 1 a.m., asking in a 2-flat voice where the ridge sauna was, an amenity I knew from the archives had closed in 1991, I smiled, kept my eyes down and radioed security. Guest needs an escort to the back office, I said calmly. Lights on? No rush. The guest stood motionless at the counter, bone dry despite the blizzard outside, eyes glassy and fixed. I didn't look up. Security arrived 3 minutes later. The guest left without a word. I found snow melting on the tile where they'd stood, snow that had been inside their shoes. I mopped it up, hands shaking, and crossed another night off the calendar. 1 shift at a time, 1 rule at a time. The wind stopped on the 9th night. Not gradually, stopped as if someone had thrown a switch. One moment the lodge was groaning under a 40-mile-per-hour gale. The next it was silent. Absolutely, perfectly silent. The fire still burned. The chandeliers still swayed slightly. But I couldn't hear them. I couldn't hear anything. It felt like being underwater. I stood behind the desk, pulse accelerating, and checked my watch. 1:47 a.m. I radioed security. Gomez, this is front desk. You copy? Static, then her voice. Copy, front desk. All clear on perimeter. Wind just died. Completely. A pause. Yeah, we noticed. Stay inside. Probably the eye of the system. Copy. I set the radio down, but my hand was shaking. The silence pressed in, thick and expectant, like the moment before a thunderclap. I turned toward the windows, blinds drawn as always, and that's when I heard it, my name. Elena. Soft, close. Not outside. Not inside. In the snow. The voice was muffled, like someone speaking through a snowbank, but I recognized it instantly. Jehoon, my brother. Elena, I'm cold. My breath stopped. Jehoon lived in Seattle. We hadn't spoken in 4 months. An argument about money, about responsibility, about me running away to the mountains instead of dealing with my life. He'd blocked my number. I'd let him, but that was his voice. Elena, come on, please. It was coming from the hallway, or the lobby. Or, no, not from a direction. From everywhere. From the snow itself, as if the air were speaking. My hands gripped the edge of the desk. Rule 2. If you hear your name in the snow, you'll know what it means. Do not answer. Do not look toward the voice. Elena, I can't find the stairs. The voice was pleading now, thin and desperate. My throat locked. Every instinct in my body screamed to move, to search, to help. I forced myself to look down at the card in my jacket. Do not answer, please, the voice said. And it cracked. Just the way Jehoon's voice cracked when he cried. That hitch in the second syllable that I'd heard 100 times growing up. I'm so cold. Where are you? My eyes burned. My hands trembled. The ridge beacon pulsed outside, red. Red, red. I crossed to the light panel. Killed the chandeliers, rang the bell once. The silence swallowed the sound. I stood in the half-dark, counting seconds, and the voice moved closer. To the staff corridor. Still my brothers. Still breaking. Elena, why won't you answer me? 2 minutes, I'm scared. 1 minute 40. Elena, I turned the lights back on. The voice stopped. I stood there shaking and radioed security. Gomez, I need a welfare check on all hallways. Full sweep, protocol, copy, on it. I didn't explain. I didn't say I'd heard a voice. I didn't say it sounded like someone I loved. I just waited. 10 minutes later, Gomez radioed back. Front desk, all hallways clear. No guests, no staff. You good? Yeah, I lied. Thanks. I crossed to the side window by the service corridor and looked out at the snow, footprints, small, sneaker tread, leading away from the service door and climbing uphill, directly into the drifts, against the wind that had died, but whose direction was still marked by the sculpted ridges of snow. Rule 3. Never follow footprints that go uphill against fresh wind. They are not yours to follow. The prints climbed until they vanished into the white. I let the blinds drop and backed away from the window. Heart hammering. Somewhere in the building. Something knocked. Not the boiler, not the pipes. Just a single deliberate knock, like knuckles on wood. I didn't answer. I sat at the desk, face in my hands, and let the tears come silently. Because I knew that if I'd opened that door, if I'd called back, if I'd followed those prints, I would have found something wearing my brother's voice, and I would have stayed. At 2:47, Jax came back. He stumbled into the lobby from the gear room, face pale, eyes red and wild. He looked like he'd been crying. His hoodie was soaked with sweat despite the cold. "Jax," I stood. "What happened?" "Someone was knocking," he said hoarsely. From inside the rental counter. The boarded-up part where we keep the old skis. His voice broke. It was saying my handle, Shredge, over and over. He stopped, breath hitching. "In my dad's voice." "My dad's voice, Eleanor. Did you open it?" "No." He shook his head violently. "No, I just ran. I ran and He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and opened his camera roll. "Look." He showed me the screen. The last hour of footage, 20 clips all overexposed. Blown out to pure white, except for a single black line running vertically through each frame. Thin, sharp, like a cable, like the lift cable on Chair 7. "I don't know what's happening," he whispered. "I don't know what this place is." I took his phone gently and deleted the clips. "All of them, it's a lodge," I said quietly. "And we're going to follow the rules, okay?" He nodded, hollow-eyed, and collapsed onto the couch. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the shift. Outside, the wind resumed, slow at first, then building, then screaming. The mountain was awake. The final storm came on the 13th night. It arrived without warning. One moment the sky was clear and star-scattered. The next, a wall of snow descended from the ridge like a curtain falling. Within minutes, visibility dropped to 0. The windows turned white. The lodge groaned under the pressure, timbers flexing, glass rattling in frames. I was alone at the desk. Jax had taken the night off, first time since the incident, and security was running a delayed perimeter check. The last guests had gone upstairs by 10. The fire burned low. The building felt hollow, expectant. At 11:52, the ridge beacon pulsed, red, red, red. I killed the chandeliers, rang the bell and started the count. But this time, the 2 minutes stretched wrong. The silence was too thick. The shadows didn't sit right. And when I turned the lights back on, Chair 7 was moving. I saw it through the gap in the blinds before I could stop myself. The chairs drifting up the line, slow and steady, each seat occupied. Shapes, dozens of them, all facing the lodge. I yanked the blinds shut, but it was too late. I'd looked. The phone rang. I checked the time, 11:56. The boiler hadn't knocked. It wasn't time for Rule 8, but the phone kept ringing. I picked it up. Silence, then faint and wet, the sound of something breathing. Not through a mouth. Through snow. Through stone. I hung up. The boiler knocked. 4 times. The phone rang again, immediate. Insistent, I answered. The breath came louder this time, layered, as if a dozen voices were exhaling in unison. I hung up. The whiteout thickened. I could barely see the far wall. The windows wept condensation. The mirror above the mantel, uncovered. I'd forgotten to sheet it, showed the lobby in reflection. 13 figures stood in the room. I counted the actual space. Just me. I grabbed a sheet and flung it over the mirror, but my hands were shaking so badly the fabric slipped. In the half-second before it covered the glass, I saw one of the figures turn its head toward me. Its face was my face. The lobby lights flickered. Outside, footprints appeared against the main doors, bare feet, pressing into the snow from the inside of the glass. Climbing upward, Rule 3. I turned away, and then I heard it. "Elena." My brother's voice. "From the service corridor. Elena, I'm here." "I found you." I closed my eyes. "You're not real." "Please. I'm freezing." "Let me in." Footsteps in the hallway, slow, wet. The main doors rattled. Someone or something knocked softly, politely. Then the east window rattled, then the north, knocking from every side. Layered, rhythmic, patient. The chandeliers hummed and dimmed again, even though I'd already followed Rule 5. The ridge beacon outside pulsed faster. Red, 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 no longer in sets of 3. Just continuous, frantic. The desk phone rang, the radio hissed. The boiler knocked in sets of 4. 5, 6, overlapping, contradictory. And then the blue light came. It started at the edges of the east windows, not dawn, Not sunrise, but a cold electric blue that bled through the cracks in the blinds like liquid. It didn't illuminate. It consumed. Where it touched, the shadows fled. The air turned brittle and thin. Rule 9. Do not be inside the lodge when the first blue of dawn touches the east windows. Leave and re-enter through the north service door. I checked my watch, 4:38 a.m. Too early for dawn. Far too early, but the blue light was rising, spreading, crawling across the walls like frost. I grabbed my jacket and ran for the service corridor. "Jax!" I screamed. "Jax!" He appeared at the far end of the hallway, stumbling, eyes wide with terror. "What the hell is... We have to leave now." The blue light touched the lobby ceiling. Something in the corner of my vision moved, tall, angular, folding itself through the space where the light met the shadow. I didn't look. I couldn't. I grabbed Jax by the hood and dragged him toward the north service door. Behind us, the knocking grew louder, deafening. Coming from inside the walls now, inside the floor, inside the air itself. The radio on my hip screamed static. The lights went out. I slammed into the service door, shoved the panic bar, and we spilled out into the snow. The cold hit like a fist. Wind tore at my jacket. Snow blasted into my face, blinding, suffocating. Jax collapsed to his knees, gasping. "Get up!" I hauled him to his feet. "We have to circle the building. We have to re-enter through the north door. That's the rule." "What? Just run!" We ran. The snow was knee-deep, the wind a living thing shoving us sideways. My boots sank and slipped. My lungs burned. I kept one hand on Jax's jacket, dragging him forward, following the outline of the lodge by touch and memory. Behind us, the blue light poured from the east windows, spilling into the snow like ink, and I heard it. Footsteps, not ours. Heavy, slow, climbing upward through the drifts, against the wind. I didn't look back. We rounded the corner, stumbled past the loading dock, and hit the north service door at 4:46 a.m. I yanked it open and we fell inside, gasping, soaked, shaking. The lobby beyond was silent. The lights were on. The fire crackled. The chandeliers swayed gently. The blue light was gone. I checked the east windows. Through the blinds I could see the faintest hint of real dawn, pale grey, soft, natural. Jax sat on the floor, arms wrapped around his knees, staring at nothing. I checked my watch. 4:47, we'd made it. Barely. At 6:15, Marta arrived for the morning shift. She found us in the cafeteria, wrapped in blankets, silent. She looked at my face, at Jax's hollow eyes, and nodded slowly. "You followed the rules," she said. "Yes." She pulled the rule card from her jacket and unfolded it on the table. Then she took a pen from her pocket and wrote at the bottom in tight block letters, 10. If you feel sure you've made it through the night, leave the building and come back in. Confidence is a window. She signed it with her initials and the date. "Good work," she said quietly, and walked away. Harlan appeared a moment later, thermos in hand. He looked at the card at us and nodded once. "You're still here," he said. It wasn't a question, it was a warning. The resort opened 2 days later. Guests arrived in SUVs and shuttles, hauling skis and boards, filling the lodge with noise and laughter and the smell of wet nylon. The lifts started running. The rental shop opened. The bar filled at happy hour. Everything was normal, but I couldn't shake it. The memory of that night, the blue light, the footsteps in the snow. I kept the rule card in my jacket at all times now, the edges soft from handling. I checked the ridge beacon every hour. I sheeted mirrors preemptively. I listened to the boiler like it was a language I was still learning. Jax deleted his entire YouTube channel. He didn't announce it. Didn't explain. Just wiped it. Every video, every thumbnail, every pinned comment. When I asked him about it, he shook his head and walked away. He worked his shifts quietly now, eyes down, hands steady. He stopped filming. He stopped joking. He followed the rules. 3 weeks in, a guest came to the desk at 2:30 a.m. She was calm, polite, bundled in a lodge robe. "Excuse me," she said, smiling. "My key card isn't working." "Room 304. I checked the system. Her card had demagnetized. "No problem," I said. "I'll reprogram it." I ran it through the encoder. It failed. I tried again. Failed, third time failed. Rule 6. Any guest keycard that demagnetizes 3 times in one night goes in the fireplace ash. No reissue. I looked up at the guest. She was still smiling, but her eyes were flat. "Empty, I'm so sorry," I said, voice steady. "There's a system error. Let me comp your breakfast and get you a new room assignment in the morning. I just need to get back into my room." "I understand. But the system's down. We'll have someone bring you toiletries and a robe to a new room. Complimentary upgrade." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away, soundless, toward the east wing. I watched her go, then pulled her keycard from the encoder and crossed to the fireplace. I dropped it into the ash. It hissed. At the end of my shift, I found Harlan in the cafeteria, same corner. Same thermos. He looked at me and nodded. "You're learning," he said. "Am I?" "You're still here." I sat down across from him. "How long have you been doing this?" 41 years, he said. "Since I was 23, I stared. "Why do you stay?" He took a slow sip of coffee, eyes distant. "Because someone has to." He tapped the rim of his thermos. "The mountain doesn't sleep, Elena. It watches. And the rules, they're not protection. They're negotiation. You follow them, you're saying, 'I see you, but I'm not yours.' You stop following them." He trailed off. "You stay," I finished. "You stay." We sat in silence for a long time. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, persistent, endless. A month later, I saw the posting. It was on the resort's job board, pinned next to the ski patrol roster and the maintenance schedule. Night audit position available. Spring turnover housing included. Mountain views. Must be reliable. The immediate start. I stared at it, stomach sinking. Someone new was coming. Her name was Marissa Kwan, 24, bright-eyed, freshly certified in hospitality management. She arrived on a clear afternoon in early December, hauling a duffel bag and a laptop case, looking at the lodge like it was a postcard. Marta assigned me to train her. I showed her the POS system, the safe drop, the radio codes. I walked her through the audit checklist, and at the end of the shift, I pulled the rule card from my jacket, worn now, creased, annotated in a dozen different hands, including mine. I set it on the desk between us. "Read this in your room," I said quietly. "Keep it to yourself. Trust me." She picked it up, skimmed it, and laughed, short, nervous. "Is this like a hazing thing?" I met her eyes. "No." Something in my tone made her stop laughing. "Just read it," I said. "And follow it, please." She nodded slowly. Tucking the card into her pocket, I watched her walk away, and I felt it, the weight of all the names on that card, all the years, all the people who'd sat at this desk and learned the same truth I had. The mountain doesn't sleep, it watches, and the rules are all that stand between you and staying. That night, I worked my shift as usual. The boiler knocked in sets of 4 at 12:14. I answered the phone and said nothing. The ridge beacon pulsed red 3 times at 1:03. I killed the lights, rang the bell, waited. At 4:44, I left through the north service door and circled the building in the snow. I re-entered at 4:47. The blue light never came, but I knew it was still out. There, watching, waiting, inviting outside. The wind lifted a plume of snow from the ridgeline. For a moment it hung suspended in the air, twisting, forming shapes that almost looked like hands. Then it fell, and the mountain was silent. End optional legacy. The next season. Housing included. Mountain views. 6 months later, in late spring, the resort posted another opening. Night audit position available, housing included. Mountain views. Must be reliable. A hospitality student in Boulder scrolled past it on her phone, smirked at the generic description, and applied on a whim. 2 weeks later, she arrived at Highlark Lodge with a suitcase and a smile. I met her at the front desk. Her name was Annika. She was 23, confident, eager. I handed her the keys, the radio, the orientation packet, and then quietly I handed her the card. "Read it in your room," I said. "Keep it to yourself. Trust me." She looked at me, then at the card, and her smile faltered just slightly. "What is this?" "Insurance," I said. She tucked it into her jacket without another word. I watched her walk away, and I felt the mountain's attention shift just slightly toward her. I adjusted my own jacket, the card still taped inside, and turned back to the desk. The phone rang. I answered on the first tone, silence. Then the breath. I waited and hung up. Outside, spindrift lifted from the ridge and fell upward, like snow deciding to leave the mountain. Inside, The boiler knocked 4 times. The desk phone began to ring. I reached for it and the mountain watched, always watching, always waiting, always inviting.